Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Future Proofing Your Fleet, Smart Procurement Strategies Amid Tariffs and Market Uncertainty. My name is Elizabeth Nicholson, TCA's Director of Education and Training, and on behalf of TCA's entire leadership team, I want to thank you for joining us. A few reminders before we get started. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all registrants. It will also be uploaded into TCA's Learning Center as an on-demand course and available to all members free of charge, thanks to our webinar sponsor, PLM Fleet. Should you become disconnected from today's event, you may rejoin by clicking the link provided in your registration and reminder email. Questions, which will be answered at the end of the conversation, can be submitted using the Q&A or chat icon found at the bottom of your screen. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Don Durm, a nearly 30-year veteran of PLM, is an international industry expert, writer, and keynote speaker on cold chain handoff applications, regulatory compliance, and supply chain technology. Don has been recognized 5 times by Food Logistics magazine as one of the rock stars of the supply chain, and he was recently recognized by Food Shippers of America as one of the industry's Pros to Know Award. Don is an author of the Refrigerated Transport Best Practices Guide and the Certified Cold Carrier Program to meet regulatory compliance for the Food Safety Modernization Act. Joining Don is Ken Vieth, President and Senior Analyst at ACT Research, the leading authority in commercial vehicle industry data and forecasting for the North American market. Since joining ACT Research in 1991 and becoming its president in 2010, Ken has served as the firm's principal heavy vehicle market analyst. His deep expertise in Class 8 trucks, trailers, and economic trends is widely sought after by OEMs, suppliers, and Wall Street. In fact, he is a frequent contributor to the Federal Reserve's Beige Book Report and a respected member of the Wall Street Journal Economic Forecast Panel. A recognized thought leader, Ken regularly keynotes major industry events known for delivering sharp insights and actionable intelligence on the economic factors driving the transportation sector. Moderating today's session is Lucas Subler, President of Classic Carriers and Chairperson of TCA's Refrigerated Division. Thank you very much. And Luke, you can repronounce your last name because obviously I am having issues today.
Well, thank you, and welcome everybody. We're looking forward to today's session. So with that said, we're going to jump right in and start firing away here. So first off, I'm going to shoot over to you, Don. Can you level set us on the authority of the Trump era tariffs here?
Yeah, so I don't know how you can say we're really excited to bring this topic to you, and this is really good, and we're going to level set on the tariffs. That's quite a question there, and one of the things is, the baseline really, Luke, is that tariffs are the responsibility of Congress, okay? But Congress has actually delegated those responsibility in a portion to the administration, to the president, and so right now the administration is really relying on heavily on the International Emergency Economics Power Act. And it really justifies global type of sweeping tariffs, really and we've seen that with China, Mexico, and Canada, and also in Europe and Asia. So it really covers everything. And these tariffs are really are said to be because of the trafficking of drugs, primarily fentanyl, really looking at illegal immigration. And also, trade deficits is what the president is actually using on the administration to do that. We're all hearing that the Supreme Court is actually hearing, in fact, they actually heard yesterday some arguments. And those arguments on a couple of the conservative, their questions they were asking really is leaning towards, at least you don't really know till it comes out, but really leaning towards getting rid of that power that the president has. So in this particular act. But if that actually fails, there's some other acts that he could rely on. So getting rid of this particular act, he could move on to Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974. This really gives him, and he used this primarily in his first term against China. He could go to 232, and we're all probably pretty familiar with that one. That one's on specific trade type of things. So to take for instance steel and aluminum, he used a 232 on. He could move on to Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, which rarely is used, but it gives him that broad ability to put 15% tariffs for 150 days to address any type of acts like that. So those are some of the things that he could do. The challenge that the administration would have if they use these particular acts is that he would have to go to the Department of Commerce and they would have to do a study. And that would take 270 days. And then he would have 90 days to implement whatever they particularly came out with. So it wouldn't be as quick as he could do it now. Why do I think he's probably doing it the way he's doing it right now is because I really feel that he feels like he has only so much time to be able to put all this together. So he's using this specific act of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to be able to do that. And why is that? Because only three times has the in the last 100 years has the current sitting president in a midterm election kept his party, and so that house could be expected to flip at that point. So, in brief, that's a lot of stuff, but that's kind of what we're looking at right now for the tariffs.
Well, very interesting insight there. And, it's definitely a hot button topic, and something that everyone is definitely paying close attention to. So, again, appreciate that. So I guess we'll go off to the next. Ken, we'll fire this at you. What do you feel is the long-term relationship between, the current economy and equipment ordering? And how do the tariffs affect this? And how do you guys, what's your outlook, stack research?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Luke, and thanks for inviting me to be on this panel today. The father of modern economics. We'll start with Adam Smith. Back in 1776, wrote a book called The Wealth of Nations, and basically he said tariffs are a horrible idea. With the exception of national defense and retaliation and things like that, but generally, we have very conservative economists on our team and very liberal economists on our team, and usually I won't say they fight like cats and dogs, but there's usually a butting of heads around political issues, and right now. There is no disagreement between whether we've got our Rush Limbaugh leaning economists or our Bernie Sanders leaning economists. They all agree that this is harmful to economic activity, if anybody wants a really kind of good source on tariffs, I would encourage you to go seek out the Yale Budget Lab. They're doing some great work there, and just as an example, in 2024, the tariff rate in the United States was 2.4%, and it's 17.9% right now. So a 7.5x multiple on the tariff. And last year, the tariff bill in 2024 was about $100 billion. It's projected to be about $300 billion next year, or this year, and $500 billion next year. The problem, per Goldman Sachs and some other folks on Wall Street, is U.S. businesses and U.S. consumers are paying about 80% of that bill. Kind of just adding more inflation to an economy that's already been beset by inflation. And so with that preamble, I'll circle around to the question, Luke, which is some people will say truckers buy equipment to haul freight, and we we don't disagree that, the reason you buy equipment is to haul freight, but I think fundamentally it's truckers buy equipment to make money. And where we are right now in the pre-call, we were talking, one of the things that we do at Act Research is we take the 12 publicly traded truckload carriers, quarterly.
And staying on this, I guess, with the economy and inflation and everything else, they consider tariffs taxes. And how is this affecting, consumer spending trends? Because, you hear consumer confidence is great, you hear consumer confidence is down. Where do you guys see it?
Don, you want to jump on first, or you want me to?
You go ahead and take that one. So
Sure. So the National Retail Federation, put out their expectation for Christmas spending at -1% on a year-over-year basis. And with that, I think they're tracking dollars, and so that's like a nominal number. So if you adjust that for 3% inflation, as inflation's currently running, you should be looking at kind of the freight volumes in the fourth quarter around the holiday season about 4% below year ago levels. So I think broadly speaking, kind of coming into 2025, consumer wealth was at record levels. Business balance sheets were in excellent shape. We've got a nice secular trend in AI and data centers and utilities. So there's still, we don't want to go and just say the U.S. economy is horrible. There's still a lot to like there, but certainly the inflation that we've gone through, since the pandemic, is starting to get a little better. Then we had tariffs, and now inflation's going back the other way.
And actually said that, the first half of the year, I think, was like 1.2% GDP growth, if I remember right. And they said if you eliminate data centers and technology out of that, it's half. So that's kind of scary. So I definitely something to keep an eye on. So we're going to pivot over here to Don, and I guess how the tariffs affected, the cost. I mean, we all see everything going up and up, but mainly on refrigerated trailers, from the manufacturer side of things as well as the consumer side of things, for the carriers. What's it doing?
yeah, I mean, just as you're feeling all those pressures and stuff with the Great Freight Recession, I think I've heard it called a couple of times in the media. The manufacturers are feeling it even doubly. So they are, we talked a little bit earlier about aluminum and steel components with a 50% tariff. Well, if you buy that steel and aluminum in the U.S., the market will bear what the market will bear. And what we're doing is we're finding those will increase their pricing also internally inside inside the domestic range for it. So really big challenges there. So people are looking at higher production cost, these manufacturers. So when they're doing that, they're not able to give you good pricing in the beginning. And what I mean by that is they will go ahead and take what their current sourcing is, or what they think the current sourcing is going to be at the time of manufacturing. Part of the challenge here is that with so many cancellations, and Ken is like the leading authority on that one to know all the knowledge on those. But what happens is that as a slow up production lines in order to keep their people busy. The challenge is that when it may be 6 months before you can build a trailer, and actually, so that's when they can actually tell you what the real price is. So my customers, when they come in and we do a leasing program, we'll go ahead and give them a quote, but we have to also tell them, hey, there could be some changes with that number at the point. We saw this particularly at COVID. This is like COVID 2, almost, is supply chains were having their challenges for length, but now they're physically slowing down those lines in order to keep that. So you can expect longer lead times. So if your equipment acquisition is, you feel like, okay, every, when I come up about 5 months, 4 months, or whatever that number is, you may have to look a little bit longer. So you need to be connecting with the manufacturers on that, because there's going to be reduced availability for those slots. And that price volatility, you've got to be prepared for that also, to be able to look at when I buy something, or when they give me a number today, it might not be good 6 months from now or 4 months from now when they actually start to build that. Um, I look at fleets, and refrigerated trailers can be almost double what they used to be a few years ago. I looked at, just looking at a car. I took a Honda Accord, stuck it in AI and a Chat GTP, and got back. It's about 15% more over 7 years, and we've seen a lot more increase on a refrigerated trailer versus that. And are we seeing that much technological advantages to it? Probably not. For that price point, but we're all in that same boat. So that's kind of what the manufacturers, if you go to any trade shows and you talk to the manufacturers, they're depressed. It is, and I do wrap ups on these trade shows. I sit on a couple of committees, and it's just dire out there for all of us.
Well, that it is. And, to your point, I don't care if it's a truck OE, a trailer OE, every one of these guys is so slow. They're laying people off, and it's sad to see. And we went through a tractor plant a while back and said, if I want a truck, if I order today, he said, 3 weeks we'll have it on your lot. And I can't think of a time in my life, and I've been around this my entire life, so that you could just go and say, unless it was on a lot, that you could have it within a few weeks. Heck, half the time it takes that long to bring them in, PDI them, do the whole 9 yards. So,
And I think just adding to it, the purpose of really slowing it down now is because they don't want to let that. This has happened before where they added a bunch of capacity to industry, added lines, different things like that, and all of a sudden that dried up. They got down to, hey, you know what? 90, 120 days, I can get you a refrigerated trailer. And then when that leads out, they lose all that that knowledge base that they need to do that. So they're trying to just keep their doors open and then keep that workforce in place to eke it out for this period of time. So
okay. And with these increased pricing and everything, how are you feeling that the best ways you're seeing fleets combat some of this?
yeah. So is that for me?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Some so part of the challenge with when fleets are looking at this, if they keep their equipment cycle going, in other words, their life cycle, I get every 5 years, every 7 years, whatever that number is. The challenge for you is that if you buy something today and tomorrow it's worth 20% less, or whatever that number is, if tariffs are removed, at this point, you basically overpaid for that asset. And so you may be in a negative position. So residual risk is what your concern is out there. So when I go to sell it, am I going to get it? We talked earlier about the used trailer market. With the bottom dropped out, it's great, or whatever it might be. But if you overpay right in the beginning, then you're going to have a real challenge there. So residual risk is what I see a lot of customers looking at. They also are looking at, with the explosion of the pricing and the pricing volatility, and in today's lean times, maybe it makes more sense to look at preserving that capital and maybe looking at other financial structures in order to do that, as you traditionally may not have looked at before. So we're seeing some fleets actually work within the realm of leasing in that case, and coming to us that don't traditionally lease from PLM, and they're now approaching. We see some fleets that are actually have trailers on order, and they want to keep that moving because they want to cycle in their trailers continuously, that they need. They're not necessarily growing, but they want to cycle the asset, and there are definitely reasons for doing that. They're coming to us and saying, "Hey, can you purchase?" So it's a purchase, direct buy from the manufacturer, and then we lease back that equipment. Even though it's their equipment, they ordered it maybe a few months ago. We step in as far as the financier for it, and take that burden off of them. So, those are some of the things that they're looking at. But when you're looking at mitigating risk, you definitely want to look at insulating yourself against that risk. And so, looking at different strategies is always very important during these particular times. Um, Some fleets are looking maybe even to expand their life cycle to go beyond. And I don't want to steal Ken's thunder, but we were talking at one point, and we did another an engagement, and trailers, refrigerated trailers, as old as they've ever been. Okay,
Mhm.
they've never been this old before, as an average, and so with that, more maintenance issues comes up. So you have to look at total cost of ownership, and when you're looking at that. So that's kind of some of the things that we're seeing here on mitigating that risk.
Good. Well, I can assure you, if you bought a piece of equipment in the last 5 years, you are underwater in it because it's worth nothing. So, and you overpaid for it to boot. So, kind of a double-edged sword there. I guess we'll pivot here a little bit, and Ken would kind of look to you, on the freight market, and that's near and dear to my heart because I know how kind of abysmal it looks right now. But where do you see the market balance, and how do you see for hire carriers? How do you see our rates changing over the next few years?
So we think I guess in the short term, we were seeing some nice little kind of 5% year over year improvement in spot rates per DAT's data. Pretty much through October, we were seeing that spot rate net fuel up around $1.70 a mile, it was looking a little bit sticky. Of course, you have to remember we had tariffs go into place on October 6th, so a lot of freight got shipped in September, in August and September to get moved, to get it landed on shore in the United States. So we think that kind of October bump up in freight rates was related to that. Unfortunately, just in the last week, we've seen, a retreat and I'm talking about, kind of dry van spot rate here. I guess I should be, talking about reefer spot rates,
There you go.
we can, so we can, just, change the numbers, but the song is pretty much the same. We saw, kind of rates peaking in middle of October, and since then, they haven't given up a lot, but that strength we were seeing, has waned somewhat. Looking at the calendar, starting by saying, the first quarter is typically a bad quarter, even in a good year.
Mhm.
That the first quarter is not when you're looking for traction. You're too far away from produce season. You're too far away from beverage season, especially in the reefer market. But I think also, just broadly from a kind of aggregate, freight market, that there's just still lingering overcapacity, and of course, I don't know, hopefully nobody on anybody's bingo card who's listening, tariffs isn't when you have whenever somebody says tariffs, when you have to take a shot, because you're already done. But one of the things that happened in 2025 because of the tariffs is, businesses were pulling freight forward, consumers were pulling purchases forward. Kind of the last of the big tariffs, hit in October, and a lot of sales got pulled forward. So we don't see a lot of traction in the remainder of Q4. Not a lot of traction in Q1. But one thing that is happening right now is we're finally starting to see some contraction in the tractor fleet. Finally nobody's making money, so they've stopped buying equipment. I think we've talked, ad nauseum, over the past few years about private fleets, bringing in capacity into an overcapacitized market. I think private fleets, with their operating costs, up around $4 a mile per the NPTC, those guys are starting to choke a little bit on all the capacity they brought, the tractor capacity they brought in. So we think, the for hire guys aren't buying because they're not making any money. The private fleets, who don't care so much about making money, but do care about losing money, are starting to say, man, we don't want to buy equipment either. We've seen a really sharp step down in the level of demand for tractors and I think also we've got a couple things in place, kind of English proficiency on CDLs. Not that it hasn't been a thing since CDLs happened, and now we have this non-domiciled CDL issue coming up. So we do think that combination of kind of bad freight economics is helping to start driving capacity out of the market at a quicker rate. So the good news is we're starting to get the supply side under control and capacity is coming out of the market. So then it becomes a demand side question. And we think again, we kind of like the U.S. economy and we think by the second quarter that supply demand balance should start showing in spot rates, where we're looking at next year kind of spot rates up 12% on a year-over-year basis. The problem is contract rates lag spot rates by about 6 months. So if you get an improvement in spot rates in Q2, the good news is you can see that contract rate coming, but you're not going to see that contract rate relief until you get to like 2027 build season or bid season. So gird your loins and hunker down. It's gonna get better, but it just takes some time. But we do think that in the reefer market, one of the things that Don mentioned that the reefer fleet is all time old at this point, and unfortunately the trailers are costing a lot more. But we saw the reefer market, on a capacity basis peak in 2024 at about I think I've got a chart up here somewhere about 450,000 units and yeah, 452,000 units and by the time we get to the end of 26, we're down to about 435,000 units. So we're looking at about a 4% capacity takeout, just old trailers dying and with weak new demand, that's going to help. It's those things that are going to help turn the tide on rates. So the supply side is correcting. Now we just need some love from the demand side to get us right.
Well, good. And, something you brought up in that, and we followed you guys for a long time and appreciate all the insight you guys lent us. And, you'd mentioned the private fleets and them adding capacity. At one point I thought they were saying these private fleets were going to, they were going to start shedding capacity because they're looking at what they can move the freight for through a private carrier or versus I apologize, for a for hire carrier versus on their private fleet. I can't remember what the number was. It was
So historically the spread between private fleet operating costs and for hire rates, it's about 50 cents a mile on contract and about 75 cents a mile on spot. Currently, as per the NPTC and the data we get from DAT, currently those spreads are about $1.75 on spot and about $1.25 on contract. So just so far out of kind of the historically acceptable rate spread. But I think a lot of private fleets, well, a lot of shippers, in 2021 were trying to get their freight moved, and there was no for hire capacity to move that freight because the freight market went up 10%. We all stayed home and ordered stuff on Amazon, and there just wasn't enough equipment. And the guys with private fleets said because their companies also couldn't get all their stuff moved. And a lot of CEOs were like, we need to make sure this doesn't happen again. And that was, in 2023 and 2024, that's when, those private fleets were adding a lot of capacity into the market to harden their networks, if you will, right ahead of a downturn, and now they're stuck with very expensive operating costs in a really a bargain priced for hire market.
Well, that's a good way to put it, bargain priced. I don't really like that term, but I will accept that. So I guess, Don, I'm going to flip over to you and would like to, talk a little bit of risk mitigation. And, carriers are so heavily leveraged by their debt and everything else. And what can companies do to kind of mitigate these tariff related financial risk?
Yeah, and so I mean that's a really great question. And again, I think I'm going to just re-hone on what we talked about before, and that's really looking at um, I need to look at other financial structures that I traditionally don't look at. So traditionally, if you buy, you purchase, or you go to the bank and get that, and that's on your books, and then you go to sell that. There's some holes there that you're definitely going to run into because number one, we talked a little bit earlier about the value of that asset as you purchase it and then you go to sell it. You could be in that negative position or an even more negative position. So you're looking for someone else to take on that risk. And leasing. I've got 15,000 refrigerated trailers that PLM owns in the U.S. And so that's what our customers are really looking at. And then as far as capacity, they're looking for that maintenance structure also that we can actually take care of that trailer on its journey. Um, Not everybody has the same mixed fleet, so you might look at your mixed fleet, have so much ownership, 60% ownership, 40 or and 30% lease, and then maybe I rent some for that flex up and flex down. That's another component of managing risk would be looking at the rental fleet itself. Maybe you don't, so that way you can increase and decrease your capacity at a moment's notice to be able to do that. And you can short term or long term the rentals also and get some more favorable rates if that's what you're looking for. So it's really about preservation of capital right now. A lot of fleets are having challenges. They're making those ends meet. So you would definitely want to preserve that capital at least for a period of time. Um, and and again you look at those sourcing. So I can tell you part of risk mitigation, PLM went through this in 2008 2009 when the economy tanked there again, with refrigerated trailers, and nobody was buying, we weren't purchasing either, we were just trying to get by with what we did. We cut off capex, so I actually turned down business during that period of time even though people wanted to lease. And because that came from our parent company. But what we had to do eventually was to start adding back that years, that 2008, 2009 capacity because we got imbalanced. And when you become imbalanced, your maintenance structure goes bad. So you have all your trailers aging. I mean, look, you probably know this. Yep, when they're all brand new, wow, it's really good. It doesn't cost as much. It's very low to run. When those get older and those compressors start blowing and things all at the same time, just give you tires for as an example. You put a bunch of tires on a trailer, and they're great the first year. If you don't put in your budget for a brand new set of tires the next year, it's in trouble. If you have 200 trailers, multiply that by 200
Mhm.
if that's it. So mitigating risk is a real opportunity, and that all fleets should be looking at. And so I mean that's what I would say to it.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And, I guess we'll kind of pivot over here for a minute to Ken and looking at equipment demand. And I mean, we know where it's at. We know it's down, but how far down are we? And I mean, where do you see it going in the near future?
Sure. So yeah, and I think this is an important question, and kind of circling back to Don's point, kind of thinking about fleet strategy, and of course, as I said, if you're not making money, you're not buying equipment, and everybody gets it. But In 2019, the year before the pandemic, we had the reefer market sold 50,000 or produced 50,000 reefer trailers in 2019. And if I look from the 5 years 2019 to 2023, the industry average production of about 42,000 reefer trailers per year. In 2024, that dropped to 36,000 units. This year, our forecast is 24,500, and our forecast for next year is 26,500. Our replacement number, we use stock replacement models, which is basically old equipment dies, and it's kind of a traditional capital goods modeling. Well, the way you model capital goods is we say in rust we trust. Old stuff starts falling apart and you have to replace it. Our replacement number for the U.S. reefer market's about 35,000 units a year. So that's kind of what just in kind of the state of nature, if you will, or 0% GDP growth, we should still be replacing about 35,000 trailers a year. So this is where I talked about seeing about 4% of the market capacity going away in the next few years, and I think certainly it's unavoidable. But I think also it's important, and I'll start with an anecdote. I was on a call, I guess 2 weeks ago now, with a fairly major supplier, not a reefer supplier, but certainly a major trailer supplier. And his comment was, last year we were cutting the fat. 6 months ago we were cutting into meat, and he's like, right now we're making decisions about cutting into bone. It's a binary challenge. Just when one trucking company doesn't want equipment, basically none of the trucking companies want equipment because everybody's finances are in the same place. But then 12 months from now, or maybe it's 18 months from now, but at some point that switch is going to flip and everybody is going to want equipment. And so the chat, and of course, the supply chain's cutting capacity, the OEMs are cutting capacity. Everybody's trying to keep, and everybody understands that labor is difficult to come by in the United States. So everybody is doing their darndest to hold on to as much labor as they can. Mm-hmm. But if you've got a labor force that's maybe over capacity to build 26,000 reefer trailers a year, when demand goes to 35,000 and then goes back up to 50,000, you've got to bring an entire supply chain along. The OEMs can't snap their fingers, and so if I have kind of one piece of advice for anybody listening, and recognizing that nobody can afford a lot of new equipment right now, and I think Don has certainly offered some alternatives to keep your fleet healthy while your balance sheet isn't. When it starts to look a little bit good, and if you believe in the U.S. economy at that point, and we don't know what the economy is going to look like, don't wait to get in line, because that line is going to get long in a hurry.
I can agree with that, and the uncertainty of it, from our perspective is scary. It was well put the other week, and they said we're a tweet away from this whole thing changing overnight, and it's very true. And in not being political at all, but all it takes is a tweet. One little thing in this economy can go one way or another so fast that it's just mind-boggling. So thank you for that. And So I guess here, go ahead.
Before you go on, I was giving a presentation at the Forging Industry Association yesterday, and I made a comment to, I prefaced my presentation. I was like, I went 35 years without hardly ever mentioning politics. And unfortunately, because of that, we're a tweet away, and with especially with tariffs being so heavy-handed on what's happening in the economy, it's not like we're cheering for America is who we're cheering for, and sometimes we have to call out bad policy.
Appreciate that. Well, I guess with all that up in the air, Don, I'm going to look at you and what kind of what strategic moves can carriers make right now, to keep their competitive edge and try and again shed off the tariff environment right now.
Yeah, that's always a question that customers are always coming and asking, and really, again, it's that preservation of capital right now. It's looking at how can I get into an asset to keep on my normal life cycle program that I'm currently on, whether it's 5 or 7 years, whatever you might have. Um, because you will get imbalanced and you want to be ready for the snapback when it happens. I can tell you that, I've got 15,000 refrigerated trailers. When they get older, they cost more to operate. Um, you can go as much as 30+% on operating that trailer. Um, the other thing you need to be concerned about is thermal efficiency. So the thermal efficiency can drop as much as, according to some of the slides I got from the manufacturer, 35%. But internally, some of my maintenance guys are telling me it's more like 50% after that period of time. Why is that important? Well, as you well know, walking through your yard of TRUs, that there's two speeds on that trailer, on that TRU. There's high speed and low speed. It will power down once it gets to that temperature that it needs to. And the low speed actually is a fuel saving capacity that actually just maintains the temperature for you. Once your insulation, that R rating factor, like you would do in your home, that drops, then you're running at high speeds for longer periods of time. So a
Mhm.
brand new refrigerated trailer is going to get you 0.6 gallons per runtime hour. I've seen old trailers go do as much as 2.5 gallons a runtime hour.
Wow.
Um, so right now we say 1.4 typically, and in industry we always have 1 hour, 1 gallon, right? That's kind of what we went by. Um, so, you look at your fuel, what are you spending in maintenance? If a compressor goes and you dump five, six, $7,000 in a trailer to fix it and to put it back on service, are you really going to get rid of it the next year when you have the great snapback? You might hold that asset because now you've reinvested in that unit, and now you're negative, you're even more negative in that unit than you were anticipating. I think it's important, also that TMC, they did a study on older refrigerated trailers, and they can weigh as much as 2,000 pounds from when they were brand new. And so you're dragging an additional 2,000 pounds, all water soaked. It's all about, taking care of that refrigerated trailer and making sure it's maintained properly to do that. Um, Telematics is a real friend. To start to learn how to use that telematics for your business. I know we use it a lot. At least a lot of my customers turn off all those alarms because it'll flood you. It'll flood your phone.
Great.
So how do you get rid of that noise? Okay, where do you put that at? So, I really look at managing it, from behind essentially. So you're pulling historical data. I was at a company. They've got 14 locations in the U.S. and in Florida they were running stop start 96% of the time, continuous run 4% of the time. Pretty good. Uh, in Colorado, they were running 88% of the time in continuous run and 12% in stop start. And so I did a whole, analysis of what you're spending in fuel based on that, those hours and what you're doing. You're paying me that maintenance also on top of the fuel. Additionally, you're also have a bigger carbon footprint. And However you think about it, our world is becoming social eaters. Okay, they want to know what you're doing to be sustainable, and this is just a great opportunity. If you flip the switch on the refrigerated trailer, you can have that ability to have a sustainability statement for your customers to say, here's what we're doing, along with the smart way and all those type of technologies in there. So I think, strategies for moves, I say, I understand it's really tough out there, but maintain your fleet life cycle. Don't get out of whack in that. I understand you're not adding capacity. You may look at maybe even reducing capacity and using, when things come back a little bit, you rent some, you use that 10% strategy. I've got customers, they'll say 8 or 10%. I'm always going to rent. And then from that, you're just going to be able to flex up and flex down when you need to. It's good to establish those relationships, in that realm. So when you need those assets, you can actually draw upon it. So yes, it's tough times. I'm not going to tell you it's the greatest time in the world, but it's going to, when you come out of this, you're going to do really, really well. And Ken's right. When it snaps back, those trailer manufacturers are going to be, they're going to be happy, and they're going to let that they're going to enjoy having you wait a year. I mean, during COVID, I will tell you, I had a customer, it took 3 years to get the asset to him. Three years, you know, 3 years. So that was the longest one we had. And of course, when you look at specialty trailers or anything like that, they start to put those at the back of the line. So.
I've heard of, we did hear some guys, year and a half, 2 years, 3 years. That's a record on my end. That must have been made it gold plated or something. But regardless, that's just unbelievable that they're waiting that long. So, excuse me. Well, I guess we'll go to probably my favorite part here is I call it my magic 8 ball. You guys call them crystal balls, I believe, but mine's been pretty foggy for a long time, and every time I shake that magic 8 ball, it just says, "Please ask again later." So, Ken, with everything going on, no carriers are not buying equipment, trucks or trailers. We've got everything happening around us. That this is coming, that we're going to have to buy equipment. What I know everybody has to do it when it works for them, but what are you guys seeing as the right time? When's this thing going to just ignite?
So I think one of the problems, I hate to bring up the T word one more time, but here we are. Uh, the tariff programs that have occurred over the course of 25, there was a lot of a lot of noise early in the year, but most of the tariffs didn't really start hitting until later in the second half of the year. So and per the Yale Budget Lab, the worst of the tariff hit, even though we've been working with uncertainty all year in 2025, the worst of the tariff hit actually hits in 2026. And so it's really, and a lot of it's concentrated, kind of right now, fourth quarter, first quarter, maybe a little bit of the second quarter. But we do see, as I've said, we see the U.S. economy as resilient. And if we get, and I was encouraged yesterday, Don started the conversation today talking about IEEPA tariffs, and that case was being heard at the Supreme Court yesterday. And even some of the most conservative justices seemed quite skeptical of the Trump administration's claim that they have the ability to tax. And as Don said, certainly Congress has abrogated a lot of their tariffing responsibility to the executive over the last 70 or 80 years. But in the Constitution, Congress is the one that is the body of government that gets to declare tax or gets to make tax policy. And tariff. If you look at the dictionary, after the word tariff, it says tariff is a word that means tax. So this is a tax on it's kind of a, for lack of a better word, it is a tax on U.S. consumers and businesses. And ultimately, I say consumers and businesses, but ultimately consumers pay for everything because we're the ones that are, consuming what businesses make. So if the Supreme Court rules, and it could be anywhere from, the end of December to the end of June before we get a ruling. If the Supreme Court rules against the Trump administration on IEEPA and reciprocal tariffs, we, as best we can tell, that's about 2/3 of the tariff bill that would go away. Now the 232 tariffs, the national defense tariffs on steel and aluminum, are still going to be in place. So that tractor that you bought last year is still going to cost $10,000 more next year, and that reefer trailer that you bought last year is still going to cost 5% more than it did last year, because the steel and aluminum and a lot of those inputs are still being taxed on national defense grounds, which is within the president's purview. So anyway, I don't think I've quite gotten to the answer to the question, but it's really moving through the second half of 2026 into 2027 is when we see things tweets as caveat aside, that we see things getting better, more broadly in the U.S. economy, and maybe less pain. If the tariffs go away, a lot of the inflationary pressures start to go away as well.
Very good. Very good. Well, Don, again, look over to your crystal ball. Is it any clearer than anybody else's? And
No, not at all.
okay. Well, at least we're all in consensus here. So
I think too is that Ken made reference to congressional and the power of the executive branch. And I mean, we're seeing this stuff all down the line. The Chevron rule was disbanded, okay, by the Supreme Court, which really lent agencies within the government to make laws and policies. And that's where all those FSMA rules came from. The Sanitary Transportation Rule Act, that all came from FDA. And I asked FDA, sitting at the table, because we had written a best practices guide that was mentioned earlier, and I've actually been on the stage with FDA to how to meet compliance through best practices. Because what I noticed is everybody had a best practice. So industry came together, created this document, scientific. There were warehouses, shippers, there were logistics, and also trucking companies that were involved in it. And I asked the question, why won't you endorse it? Well, we want to be able to interpret the rule at the time of the infraction. So, because we don't know anything about transportation. So, I'm an ex-cop. I spent 12 years in law enforcement, and that's like me pulling you over, Luke, and then going back to my car and opening up the book and say, I know he did something wrong, but let me just see what I got in the book. Okay, that's illegal. you know.
yeah,
So, I can tell you that I've heard, I'm heavily into the food distributors for restaurants and grocery, and the manufacturers are telling them that, that these price increases on food are probably going to hit around the second Q of next year, when you're going to see significant price increases on the food itself. And then it could, of course, that'll be the consumer. Now, again, we're one tweet away or one T away, according to Ken. That could all change. So it's, my guidance, really, the crystal ball is, be ready when it comes back. We don't know when. I know business hates not having that clarity or instability, but if you're going to remain relevant in the industry, if you're going to have a bunch of older equipment that you've kind of reinvested in, you might not be able to get the business. There might be somebody out there doing it that'll do it. So it's not a great crystal ball, but it's a look a little bit into what we're hearing.
very good. Well, thank you. I think we've got a few minutes left here on our hour. Elizabeth, do you have any questions that have come through that we want to maybe tackle before we get off here?
We have, yes, thank you. We have one question. What's the driver's impact on the economic challenges we're experiencing today?
Which one?
Don't all talk at once.
Oh, you know, so yeah, so we're talking. I mean, Ken alluded to it a little bit earlier about I don't know how you put it. I put undocumented CDL or non-resident CDLs that are in the country, and I was looking at that statistic. DOT says their estimates are about 200,000 of those drivers in the U.S. 97% will not be able to comply with the ruling in September. I hear different trucking companies saying that it's probably much more than that. So there's definitely going to be some capacity. Some of those, it may not even be a bad thing because they're working maybe a little bit more under the table than maybe what you're paying your drivers, and so they're working for less. And so that may shrink some of the capacity on some of those fleets out there that are kind of cutting corners quite a bit on what maybe you have to abide by all the regulations and things like that. But there's a big focus in it from the community because I mean, I live here in Florida, and I think everybody saw the accident where the gentleman was making basically a U-turn on the highway, and that van went in and killed 3 people. And then New York gave somebody a license, said no name given, on the license. So we got that kind of stuff, and here we got fleets that are trying to operate in a traditional and a good business manner. So, Ken, you want to dive into that one? Because
Yeah, so just so for some context, we think that the kind of the active tractor fleet in the United States is about 2 million units. So if you're talking 200,000 CDLs, you're talking about getting rid of 10% of the capacity. I'm guessing a lot of those CDLs, there are for the non-domiciled CDLs. We think probably a lot of them are kind of H-1A, H-1B visa holders. So what we don't know is what percentage of that 200,000 is the right number to think about. But even if you get rid of, if it's only 20 or 30 or 40,000 drivers, you're still talking about taking one or 2 percentage points of drivers out of the market. So, if it's 200,000, we're going to see, spot rates at $5 a mile in 2 years. If you want a crystal ball number, I will add though that I was at a conference a couple of years ago, and David Parker, the founder of Covenant Transportation, was asked. He was presenting, and he was asked a question about drivers and kind of the lack of driver shortage, and David made the comment. It's like we pay our drivers so much more today than we used to pay them. It used to be $45,000 or $50,000 a year. Now it's like $75,000 or $80,000 a year. So you could make the case back in 2017 or 18 that driving kind of sucked as a vocation. You're away from your family, you're on the road, and you're just not making a lot of money. Now you still are away from your family and doing a hard job, the hard, thankless job, but at least you're being reasonably well compensated. So compared to say 10 years ago, and I did just as a thought it was interesting. ATRI's annual survey came out, and their top 10 trucking industry issues, for the first time ever, driver availability was not in the top 10 issues in the ATRI survey. So hopefully we get some, whether it's English as a second language or some of these non-domiciled guys to get that capacity out of the market can only be helpful for the industry. And if it is a bigger number than we think it is, it's probably time to, make sure you invest in equipment sooner rather than later, because everybody's going to be rolling in money after this last few years.
Well, our crystal ball is, especially with the non-domiciled and everything else is, I think that's going to bring the driver shortage right back up to the forefront. I truly do. And you touched on, driver wages that increased and everything else. That was one of the best things that happened through COVID, is that I truly felt that we finally started paying our drivers what they were worth. They needed to be able to make that 100,000 plus if they wanted to work hard. And, it was, for us, we were again happy to give that money out. And since, in the last few years, it's been flat for these guys, and everything is all, their bills have went up around them as well, just the same as us as carriers. So, I think that's going to be something we're going to have to really look at here as things tighten up, and this is going to be the next driver shortage. And like I said, it's not that there's not a lack of drivers out there, but it's the fact that there's a lack of quality and qualified drivers out there. And that's the key, is that sure, you can throw anybody behind a steering wheel, but your quality companies are not going to hire unqualified drivers. So Elizabeth, did you have anything else for us, or?
No, I did not. Thank you, everybody, for today's webinar. I thought it was very, very good, and I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
All right, well, thank you, Elizabeth, for setting it up. And Ken, Don, really appreciate the insight there. It was great talking with you guys. And as always, I learned something new every day. And with you two, that's never in short supply. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Luke. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks,
Don.
Luke.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.